Imagine being born into a world where your very shadow is considered a pollution. People just like you would turn away if they saw you coming. You could not drink water from the same well as your neighbor because your touch would make the water impure. You could not walk on the same road, worship in the same temple, or let your children study in the same school. For millennia, this was the reality for millions of people in India. They were called untouchables, a label so cruel and degrading that the world has few comparisons. But they gave themselves a different name. They call themselves Dalit, a Sanskrit word meaning broken or ground down. It is a name that describes their lived reality, but it also describes the fierce, unbreakable spirit of a people who refuse to be shattered. Today, we are going to explore their ancient origins, their long struggle against oppression, and their fight for justice that continues right now. Let us go back to thousands of years and find out why this system was built in the first place. To understand the story of the Dalits, we have to first understand the system that created them. This system is known as Varna. Around 3,500 years ago, when the ancient texts called the Vedas were being composed, we see the first seeds of this social order. The original concept of Varna was perhaps more fluid and based on a person's qualities or profession. It divided society into four main categories. First, Brahmins, the priests and scholars at the very top. Second, Kshatriyas, the warriors and rulers. Third, Vaishyas, the traders, farmers, and merchants. Fourth, Shudras, the servants and laborers meant to serve the other three. But this was just the beginning. A religious text, the Manusmriti, written around 200 BCE, 200 CE, took this idea and turned it into a terrifyingly rigid tool of social control. It did not just describe society, it dictated every single rule of it. According to the Manusmriti, the Brahmins were the supreme beings, emerging from the mouth of the Creator God. The Shudras were said to have come from his feet, born only to serve the other three. This text was the sharp turn toward cruelty. It laid out rules. Higher castes could not eat with Shudras. Shudras could not accumulate wealth. If a Shudra listened to a sacred text, the punishment was horrifying, pouring molten lead into their ears. This was not just inequality. This was state-sanctioned oppression designed by a priestly class to maintain absolute power. But right at the bottom, below even the Shudras, were the people who were left out of this system entirely. They were called the Panchamas, the fifth Varna. Here we find the Chandalas, the earliest historical group we would recognize as untouchable. The Manusmriti describes the Chandala as the child of a Brahmin mother and a Shudra father, a mixed birth that was viewed as an abomination. They were assigned the most degrading work imaginable: handling dead bodies, cleaning human waste, and executing criminals. While other Shudras lived on the edges of villages, the Chandalas were forced to live entirely outside the city walls or in the deep forests. They had to wear clothes from the dead, and their broken pottery was a signal for higher castes to stay away. Even their shadow was considered impure. This evolution from a fluid Varna system to a rigid, birth-based caste order, including the emergence of the untouchable Chandalas, is extensively documented in scholarly works on early Indian law and social history. The Manusmriti serves as a key primary source for this legalistic turn towards cruelty. For centuries, the darkness seemed total. But even in the most oppressive eras, the human spirit pushes back. In medieval India, between the 7th and 17th centuries, a revolutionary wave swept across the subcontinent known as the Bhakti movement. At its core, Bhakti was simple: a personal, loving devotion to God that did not require a priest, a temple, or a caste certificate. Anyone, no matter how low-born, could reach God through love and poetry. This movement gave birth to saints who were radical social revolutionaries. The most powerful voices among them came from the Dalit communities themselves. Sant Ravidas was born into a family of cobblers, an untouchable caste. In his powerful poems, recorded in the holy book of the Sikhs, the Guru Granth Sahib, Ravidas did something unprecedented. He imagined a city without fear, without sorrow, and without caste. He called it Bigumpara, the city without sorrow. Can you imagine the revolutionary power of that thought? While Brahmin priests told him he had no soul, Ravidas dared to imagine a world where caste did not exist at all. He wrote, "The regal realm is my father's home. Bigumpara is my city. I live in a state of peace and equality." There was also the fearless mystic Kabir, who mocked the rituals of both Hindus and Muslims, famously saying, "If God lives in a mosque, then what is in the rest of the world?" The Hindu says Ram is the beloved, the Muslim says Rahim. Let's fight. Let one kill the other. No one has ever found the secret. Their poetry was the voice of the voiceless. It traveled through oral traditions, inspiring millions that there was another way to be human. The Bhakti movement's counter-hegemonic challenge to caste orthodoxy is well documented. The verses of Ravidas, especially his utopian vision of Bigumpara, and the works of Kabir and Namdev are primary sources that show a powerful undercurrent of social and spiritual resistance throughout the medieval period. The real seismic shift, however, began in the 19th century. When the British arrived, they brought with them new technologies like guns and a very different idea: universal human rights. But the true revolution did not come from the British. It came from India's own reformers, men who looked at their society and demanded change. Jyotirao Phule, born in 1827, was a revolutionary thinker who did something radical for his time. He turned the mythological origin story on its head. He argued that the Brahmins were not divine beings but invaders who had conquered India and then created the caste system to enslave the native peoples, whom he called the real Kshatriyas. In 1873, he founded the Satyashadhak Samaj, or Society of Truth Seekers, an organization dedicated to ending the tyranny of the caste system. Phule and his wife, Savitribai Phule, is India's first female teacher and a Dalit herself, opened the first school for girls and for Dalits. Around the same time, Shahu Maharaj, the ruler of the princely state of Kolhapur, did not just talk, he acted. He pioneered the modern concept of reservations. Shahu Maharaj himself, not a Dalit, implemented policies to reserve jobs and educational seats for Dalits and other backward communities, understanding that equality could not just be preached, it had to be enforced. This was a direct confrontation with the Brahminical control of the state apparatus. But all of these efforts were leading up to the arrival of one man, a man who would become the most powerful force in Dalit history, Dr. Bhimrao Ramji Ambedkar. Bhimrao Ambedkar was born in 1891 into a Mahar caste, considered untouchable, in a small town called Mo. He was the 14th child of his parents. As a boy, he and his siblings were forced to sit outside their classroom because their presence would pollute the other students. He had to walk miles to school, not allowed to walk on the main roads. He was not allowed to drink water from the school tap. A peon had to pour the water from a height so Bhimrao's cup would not touch the vessel. This cruelty did not break him. It forged him into a weapon of intellect. Ambedkar did the impossible for a Dalit boy of that era. He sailed to the United States and attended Columbia University, where he earned a PhD. He went to the London School of Economics and became one of the most highly educated men in the entire world. He was an economist, a lawyer, a historian, a philosopher, and a revolutionary. When he returned to India, he went to war against the caste system with the only weapon he could trust: the law. His first major battle was for water. In 1927, he led the Mahad Satyagraha. The town of Mahad had a public tank, the Chavdar Lake. Everyone could use it except Dalits. So Ambedkar gathered thousands of Dalit men and women and led them directly to the lake. They walked into the water. They drank from it. This was an act of such profound defiance, such breathtaking courage. It was not just about water. It was about dismantling an entire worldview. A few years later, the fight moved to politics. The British rulers, in a misguided attempt to be fair, offered something called the Communal Award. It proposed separate electorates for Dalits. They would vote only for Dalit candidates. Mahatma Gandhi, the leader of the mainstream freedom movement, was horrified by this. He saw it as a plan to permanently divide the Hindu nation and began a fast unto death to stop it. This is where the relationship between Gandhi and Ambedkar becomes so fascinatingly complex. Gandhi called Dalits Harijans, meaning children of God. He wanted to reform the caste system from within to remove the stain of untouchability. Ambedkar, on the other hand, did not want reform. He wanted annihilation. He saw the caste system as an evil that could not be purified, only destroyed. He believed that political power was the only path to liberation. Under extreme pressure, with Gandhi on the verge of death, Ambedkar was forced to compromise. On September 24, 1932, he signed the Pune Pact. In this pact, Ambedkar gave up the demand for separate Dalit electorates. In exchange, he won a massive concession: reserved seats for Dalits in all legislative councils and an unprecedented level of political representation. Ambedkar later called this decision blackmail, but he had turned a weakness into a strategic victory. He had ensured that the Dalit voice would be heard in the corridors of power forever. In 1947, India achieved its independence. A new constitution was written, and who was chosen as the chairman of the drafting committee? Dr. Ambedkar. The Untouchable, who was once not allowed to drink water from a public tank, was now the architect of the world's largest democracy. Ambedkar did not waste this power. He wrote into the Indian Constitution the most powerful anti-caste weapons imaginable. Article 17 abolished untouchability outright, making it a punishable crime. Article 15 prohibited discrimination on the grounds of religion, race, caste, sex, or place of birth. A massive system of reservations was created, ensuring that Dalits were guaranteed seats in legislatures, government jobs, and universities. This was Ambedkar's masterstroke. He had rewritten the rules of the game. The Dalit movement had won a great victory in the halls of law. But the real battle was in the streets, in the villages, and in the hearts of people. After Ambedkar's death in 1956, a new generation of leaders rose up. One of the most powerful was Kangshi Ram. He formed the Bahujan Samaj Party in 1984. His political genius was building a coalition of the marginalized Dalits, backward classes, and Adivasis, creating a formidable voting bloc that, in the 1990s, swept to power in India's largest state, Uttar Pradesh. For the first time, a Dalit woman, Mayawati, became Chief Minister of Uttar Pradesh, one of the most powerful political positions in the country. This was a seismic shift. From a people who could not sit in a classroom to a people who could run a state of 200 million people. You might think that the story ends here in victory, that with Article 17 and reservations, the problem was solved. But the story is not over. The reality for millions of Dalits today is a terrifying contradiction. On paper, you have rights. On the ground, you still have to fight for them. The brutal truth is that violence against Dalits is not a relic of the past. It is a daily occurrence. The government passed the Scheduled Castes and Scheduled Tribes Prevention of Atrocities Act in 1989 to try and stop it. And yet, the numbers are staggering. Let me share a statistic with you that will turn your blood cold. In 2020 alone, nearly 60,000 cases were registered as atrocities against scheduled castes under this very law. And think about it, these are only the ones that get reported. The highest percentage of these calls? They come from Uttar Pradesh, one of India's most populated states. This violence takes many ugly forms. There are Dalit manual scavengers, people, almost always Dalit women, who are forced to clean human excrement from dry latrines with their bare hands. This is a practice that was legally abolished decades ago, yet it continues. Why? Because poverty and discrimination leave them no other choice. There is caste-based discrimination in housing. In thousands of Indian villages, Dalits are forced to live in separate, segregated settlements on the outskirts, just like the Chandalas thousands of years ago. There is discrimination in the courtroom and by the police. There are honor killings when a Dalit man dares to marry a woman from a higher caste. There are killings for owning land or for trying to vote. In 2018, a massive protest shut down the nation when the Supreme Court weakened the Atrocities Act. The Dalit community poured into the streets by the hundreds of thousands, showing that a modern, educated generation will not sit silently while their rights are taken away. The persistence of violence against Dalits is recorded in National Crime Records Bureau data and the need for the POA Act itself. The reliance on the helpline underscores the ongoing nature of discrimination. This is not just the history of a caste. This is the history of courage. From the poet Ravidas dreaming of Bigumpura in the 15th century, to Ambedkar writing the Constitution, to the millions of unknown women and men who still carry the torch today, the fight continues. The revolution is not complete. Not until every Dalit child can walk into a school without fear. Not until every village well is open to everyone. Not until the word untouchable is found only in history books, never spoken on earth again. The Dalit struggle is a fight for the very soul of humanity. It asks us, can we truly build a society where your birth does not determine your worth? Subscribe and ring the bell to see more interesting historical facts. As always, stay curious and I'll see you in the next one.